Hey friends, it's Kelly. I'm back today with a new scrapbook process video for the Cut Shop. And today I'm going to be using the big screen cut file, and I do have a Cricut Design Space tutorial to start. So I already have the cut file on the design screen, and I just want to use the portion of the cut file that has the film strip. So I'm going to use the slice feature to separate that portion from the rest of the cut file. I do this in almost all of my Cricut Design Space tutorials, but just as a refresher, to separate the cut file images, you do have to slice them apart or use the contour feature, and I prefer to use the slice feature. So to do that, you're just going to insert a shape, position it over the portion of the cut file that you're wanting to use, and then hold down the shift key while selecting the shape and the cut file, and then go to the bottom right hand side of the screen and click the slice icon. So for the layout that I'm going to be creating today, I do not want to use the portion that says action. I just want the film strip by itself. So you could go one of two ways in doing this. You could either leave it on there and then just use scissors after you've cut the cut file to remove that portion, or you could insert another shape and then use the slice feature to take that word action off the cut file before you send it to the cutting mat. And that's what I prefer to do. I prefer to have my design pretty well laid out on the design screen before I send it to the cutting mat, so that way I have a good idea on exactly how large I need the cut file images before I cut them. That way I don't waste a lot of paper. Now when I'm using the slice feature here, I have to be pretty precise on where I'm positioning that rectangle. I don't want to remove too much of the actual film strip. You can see there I did catch a little bit of the film strip. There's a little bit of a line above the word action, but when I'm looking at the film strip, it still looks pretty straight across, so I'm not too worried about that. But if the rectangle had been a little bit higher into the film strip and I would have used the slice feature, it would have removed too much. So sometimes you have to be pretty precise on where you're positioning things on the design screen when you're using the slice feature. All right, so now comes the time where I need to resize this film strip for the size of the photos that I plan on using. I do plan on using photos that are roughly 2 by 2 squares. So I'm going to insert another shape and I'm going to resize it to 2 by 2 just so I have a rough idea on how large the photos will be. So that way I know I'm not cutting that film strip too large. And I did want the film strips to cover a large majority of the layout. So I need to change the dimensions of this film strip in order to have it still be the correct length that I was wanting, but so that it's not too wide so my photos don't look like they're lost within those film strips. So to do that, I just used the padlock icon on the bottom left-hand side of the cut file. I clicked that, it'll unlock the dimensions. So then you can use the arrows on the bottom right-hand side and shrink the cut file to whatever size you're wanting. So I was able to shrink not only the length but the width and get it exactly how I wanted it. I am going to use multiple photos on my layout today, so I do want to duplicate that film strip now that I have it to the correct size, and I'm going to go ahead and send it to the cutting mat. And I know that this tutorial wasn't anything earth-shattering, but I do like to include these tutorials anytime that I do alter the cut files. So that way, if you want to use the cut file in a similar way, you can see how I got from point A to point B. Because had I just sized the length of the cut file to what I was wanting, the portions where the photos would have been sitting would have been way too large. And I actually ended up printing my photos a little bit smaller than 2 by 2. So that's why they do look a little bit smaller in those windows within the film strip than they did when I was using the square on the design screen. But I like how that looks. I like that there's a little bit of white space surrounding them, and I was going to tuck the photos in the middle of the film strip, so a little bit of the photo was peeking out into the next portion of the film strip. And I don't know if you caught it just a few seconds ago, I did have a gray pattern paper tucked behind this white cardstock, and I was debating on whether or not I wanted to use a pattern paper background or a white cardstock background, but I wanted to give this mixed media a go and see how I liked it, and if I didn't like it, I would just push it off to the side and grab the pattern paper instead. But I'm just using yellow acrylic paint and a brayer to apply some paint to the background. I did apply clear gesso first because this white cardstock, it's textured cardstock, and I get it at Walmart. It comes in a pad and it's pretty thin. It doesn't have a lot of durability to it. So anytime that I do any type of mixed media, regardless of what it may be, I do apply gesso to the background before I do any mixed media work because this paper does tend to warp pretty easily. But I really like how this paint looks on this background, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with this. I am going to add some splatters also just in the upper right and lower left hand corners. So I really struggled with what products I wanted to use for this layout. I am typically a product inspired scrapbooker. I'm inspired by a new collection or a cut file or a technique that I may have seen. and I usually start with that. Then I select my photos, and then I decide whether or not I want to add any journaling or any storytelling to the layout. And this layout was the exact opposite. This layout was story first, photo second, product third, and it was really difficult for me to work in that order. I really struggled with trying to figure out what products I wanted to use and how I wanted this layout to come together. I originally thought when I was grabbing products that I was going to use that gray cardstock background. So when I had that thought in mind, I decided that I was going to print my journaling to tuck behind the film strips on that yellow pattern paper. It's from a 6x6 pattern paper pad by Amy Tangerine. And once I got that mixed media on the background, I really liked how the mixed media looked, and I didn't want to cover it up with that yellow pattern paper. So here I'm just trimming it down just to get an idea of what that journaling would look like behind that film strip. And it was just covering it up too much. And I know the pattern paper is yellow, but I really liked the extra texture that that acrylic paint gave on the background. Using that brayer on the textured cardstock, it really left a really neat effect, and I didn't want to cover too much of that up. So my next thought was to use my We Are Memory Keepers typecast typewriter. So I positioned the film strips where I was going to have them on the background, and then I'm just using a pencil to trace around the inside of those film strips, so that way I know exactly where my journaling is going to fit. I did print the text on the journaling on this yellow pattern paper pretty small, so right now I'm just going through and picking out the important parts that are included in that journaling that I do want to include, because I know the font on my typewriter is larger than the font that I printed with. So this was just a way to help me get my thoughts out. When I do include journaling on a layout, I always write it out ahead of time, because I am never really quite sure what I want to say. So that really helps me when I do journal on my layouts, is just to kind of write everything out, get my thoughts out, and then rearrange them as I need to. And I really like how this looks. I can still see the texture from the acrylic paint, but the story is still on the background. And I'm really, really happy with how this layout turns out in the end. So let me tell you a little bit about the photos here. As you can see, they are printed very small, and I did convert them to black and white because they are not of very good quality. As I mentioned, this layout is very much story inspired, so I just wanted to get the story documented. I wasn't overly concerned with the quality of the photos. It was just all about the story. So I don't mind that the photos are a little bit blurry. I think sometimes that's just what you do as a scrapbooker. If the photos don't turn out great, but the story is something you want to tell, you just use the blurry photos. So these photos were taken at an MJ Live show that we went to. My son developed an obsession with Michael Jackson probably about 6-7 months ago. I think it started around Thanksgiving. I have no idea where it came from. I'm assuming he came across a YouTube video and really liked his music and liked the dancing. And I like Michael Jackson, but my kiddo has almost an obsession. I mean, he has a costume, he has loafers, he has the whole deal. And when I saw that the MJ Live show, which is a show that is based out of Vegas, they are touring, I knew that I had to buy tickets. And they were going to be in Michigan. It was about a 3.5-hour drive from our house, so it was about a 7-hour round trip. And I knew that we had to go. I knew that he would absolutely love it. And he's never been to a concert or any type of show like that before, so I knew this would be such a fun experience for him. So when we got to the show, when we got to our seats, the usher told us that Michael would be asking the kids to join him on stage to dance with him for one of the songs. And Aiden was in complete turmoil over what to do. He knew it was a once in a lifetime experience, but he was also worried he'd be really embarrassed. So the whole show, he was stressing about whether or not he should go, whether he shouldn't go, when he was going to ask. And I told him, I said, I really think you should do it. You're just going to blend in with the other kids on the background. Nobody's even going to really notice you up there, because that was his big concern, is that he would be embarrassed because people would be looking at him. So when they announced it, he decided he was going to do it. So he ran down with the usher to the stage. And once he got on stage, Michael announced that it was going to be a dance competition, and the kids were going to have to dance by themselves in the center of the stage in front of the entire audience. My heart about jumped out of my chest. I was so nervous for him, and I thought, oh my goodness, he is going to kill me, because I had told him that he was just going to blend in with everybody, and now he was going to be standing in front of the entire crowd by himself dancing. And when it came to be his turn, Michael talked to him a little bit, you know, asked him his name and how old he was, and Aiden admitted that he was nervous. So one of the backup dancers came up with him to take a little bit of the pressure off. So he did it, he danced, he got a t-shirt for participating, and all the kids got a t-shirt. There wasn't really a winner. It was all the kids were winners for just going up and participating. So it was so much fun. And when he got back to our seats, when the usher brought him back up, he was overjoyed. He had so much fun. And I was so glad, because I was really nervous about whether or not he would be happy about it or if he would be upset, because he had to do this all by himself and wasn't expecting to have to do that. So my husband was recording him dancing on my phone, and I was taking photos with my camera, and we were on the first balcony, and we were about in the middle of the first balcony. So we were up pretty high. So the photos just were not great quality. They're grainy, they're a little bit blurry, but I can make out what's happening because I do have the memory in my head. And I think if you look at the layout close up enough, you can figure out what's happening. But like I said, this was about the story. This was about Aiden getting up there and dancing in front of an entire audience. And a lot of the kids that were up there were obviously in dance. I mean, they were doing the splits and they had their leg up by their ear. And this kiddo has no dance experience. He just dances around the house for fun like most kids do. And he went up there in front of an entire audience and danced. I would never be able to do that in a million years. So I was just so proud of him for going up there and participating, and he had the time of his life. And it's something that I will always, always, always remember. So getting back to the actual layout, I decided to go with a lot of Amy Tangerine products, and I believe that a majority of the chipboard pieces are from the On a Whim collection, and I was so happy to be able to use up so many of those. Sometimes I really struggle with using those large chipboard titles. I really like the foam thickers, but those chipboard thickers are sometimes a little bit of a struggle for me to use. So I was so happy to be able to use so many of them on this one layout. And as I was putting this together, I was really trying to pay attention to how I had the colors laid out on the layout. So I had a lot of that orange going on with that large chipboard word Showtime, and then that large heart on the bottom right hand side. So I wanted to bring a little bit more of that orange to the top, but I didn't really have anything that was going to fit well there. So I ended up finding these stars in my stash, and those are from Pink Fresh Studio. Those are from, I believe, the Mix 2. And they come in lots of different colors and lots of different sizes. So I just added a few of those around the layout, again, to create a visual triangle, just to help your eye dance around the layout. So I'm going to add some black splatters, and then this layout's pretty much finished. I know I did a lot of rambling talking about the photos and the story behind the photos. So if you do have any questions about any of the products or the techniques or about the Cricut tutorial that I showed at the beginning of the video, please leave a comment below. I always love reading your comments, so I do appreciate each one of you that likes and comments. I love hearing from you, and I love responding to you. I think that's something that's really neat about the paper crafting community, is that we can build friendships through places like YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and those type of social media sites. So I do want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will be back again soon with a new layout and process video. I will have links to the Cut Shop Etsy store in the description box below, so make sure you head there to check out all of the cut files, and I will see you soon. Bye.